come and look at it, and then they're part of the artwork. So it's been like that, which is nice. I like it won't be bad if they're touching the floor. So I hung it on like a fishing wire. I loved it. I was like, oh my god, you can see the back, and then you can see the people that. Hi, I'm Kandy Lopez. I'm an artist, and I'm also a professor at NOVA Southeastern University. I'm also a mom, a daughter. Those are important. A wife, right? I gotta say that. And I make work that deals with narratives of people of color, specifically people from the city life. I live in Miami, Florida. I was born in Jersey, close to Jersey City. So, like, city has always been a part of my life. And people that live in those kinds of areas have always influenced my work. So, I'm a portrait painter. Even with my textiles, I consider myself a painter. The way that I use the line work within the yarn is also like painting. So I'm thinking about like brush strokes and how colors collide with each other, how they are complementary and also like in the same family, so analogous. And I got pregnant, planned, and I couldn't paint anymore. And I couldn't do my oil stuff because of the solvents. So I was like, okay, so I'm dealing with fashion, I'm dealing with swagger, I'm dealing with the presence of power, but also like vulnerability inside of that space. What material can I use to help me do that? So I was at Michael's, and there was a clearance section on thread and like these really small canvases. It was like 6x6. And my grandma like used to crochet all the time, and she used to hand knit. But I didn't like connect the two. I was just like, oh, there's a sale. Let me try to make the people with, because it's canvas. So I'm like, oh, I can like paint it and then add threads to it and see what happens. The painting and thread didn't work out. So I was like, well, let me just thread it and see what happens. So that became like a challenge. So they started off 6x6. And then I'm like, I don't have enough space to do the face because the face is like really important to me. Like I love the eyes and the eyes staring at the viewer, like commanding a presence instead of being, subjected. Especially for people of color. So it got bigger. So then I went like 15 to 18 inches. And then I was like, oh, how cool would it be if it was a full body? So then I tried the full body. It was bad. Like I was stitching behind and then like I couldn't open it because the stitch was too tight. And then I like learned as I created them to like not like over stitch because then you're wasting thread and yarn. So like learning how to loop back in and coming back and like doing the cross hatching stuff. And then they just got bigger and bigger and bigger. So I was creating these people, but like I know that it was important to create them, but I didn't know how important until I had my kids because they're also brown. They're Cuban, Dominican, and African American, so they have like all these mixes of things. And my son is about my skin color. My daughter is a little bit lighter, but she has like that beautiful like curly fro. And seeing all the shit on the news that you see all the time, that like being able to see themselves in spaces where they usually don't see themselves, it's important. And being a professor of color is also important. And like hearing stories of other students being like, oh, I want to, do what you do when I get to that is really important for me. Because I didn't have that. Like my teachers were white. Having kids is a challenge as an artist and professor because you're trying to like schedule everything and like what's important at this moment, not feeling guilty for like choosing being in my studio or being home right now with them, or the opposite, or like being home with them and then feeling guilty for not being in the studio is also fun. I think honestly like playing around with different materials So we would like find things all the time. Like I used to draw on cardboard because it was there, and like the barbecue grill charcoal, like it's charcoal, drawing with that, or even like chalk pastels, or just chalk from like the dollar store. Like it doesn't have to be high end quality materials. Like you can make anything out of anything. I think people going into the community, like go. Instead of you trying to like bring them into the space, why don't we go and interact with them in their space? I think it's important, number one, because art is like top tier when it comes to money. Like there's money there. And two is a way of expressing yourself. Like people of color, like you mentioned, like create culture. I feel like I learn more about myself through my work. Um, when I was in Jersey, there was a lot of racism because Bayonne is like a 2 mile radius, and it was a lot of old white people. They failed me in first grade because I only spoke Spanish, and there wasn't like an ESOL program that I can just go to. They failed my brother too. Um, and we got called all kind of names by the kids downstairs who were so friendly. And then we moved to Miami. I was like 8 years old, and we moved to Hialeah, and the neighborhood was like predominantly light-skinned Cubans. So there was a barrier there too because like I'm not any of those things. And then going to school with that and like trying to make friends. So I was like, am I like what am I? Like am I black? Am I Spanish? Am I like what like I don't fit in anywhere. And then like traveling to DR is just like, well, you're American. So you don't fit there either. And then when I got to magnet programs and I was around black people, I was like, this feels better. I mean, I don't feel like I'm black, but I also don't feel like I'm other in the space. But I didn't consider myself black either. So I was just like... And then I found my clique by middle school. So I had my Italian best friend, who's still my best friend, and my black best friend, who's still my best friend. And then I'm like in the middle of that, which was nice. So we were like a nice little like rainbow. Um, and being friends with them, and then we went to high school together, and we like stayed connected through university, even though we didn't go to the same university, but we're still like pretty tight because you're like dealing with the identity together. And then doing research on like Afro-Caribbean stuff and race things, and I was like, and then doing like my identity test, that was fun too. Um, really like nailed it. I feel like I've gone through like the African American part of it, and now I'm like digging into the Caribbean part of it, because I think that that's also really important. And yeah, I feel like every piece I do, I like learn something new about myself. So one way of relaxing, I get a massage every month. Like that's a treat for myself. I love massages. I need the materials. I need the subject. So usually like I already have 5 people that I'm thinking about, or at least 5 projects like in my brain to go through. And I need time. I think time, so like practice is something that they need. They research is also important. So like looking things up and going to museums and galleries and getting inspired. Being scheduled, I don't know. Like coming into the studio, even if you don't know what the hell it is that you're making, but just go to the studio because something will happen. Like I didn't know I was gonna get into power lines until like one of my threads fell like on a collage, and I'm like, that's so much easier than drawing a power line. Like why haven't I used threads in my collages? But I didn't. I wouldn't have known that unless I got in the studio and started playing. So like, my family is Caribbean, so there's a lot of food and there's a lot of parties. They're always celebrating somebody's quinceañera or somebody's baby shower or somebody's 5 millionth birthday. I think one thing that I like that my family does, even though it could be irritating as somebody who doesn't really like drama or like being crowds, is either the New Year's Eve parties that they have, and also Christmas. So the 24th that we celebrate. I think those family traditions are annoying but fun at the same time. I always wanted to play with stained glass. Like, I've painted on glass before. I've used glass when I'm creating my palette. Like, I like the vulnerability of glass, the hardness of glass, the transparency of glass, because I'm talking about all those things. So, like, the materials that I use, I'm very cautious of the metaphors that come from the material. I think about our history. Our history always pops up in my head, and church is like one of the biggest things when it comes to our history. Um, and looking at like the beautiful stained glass windows and traveling to Europe and seeing that stuff, and I'm like, man, there's no black people like being represented in any of these holy spaces where they should be. So I always wanted to like try that, and because I wanted to create a piece of people of color that feel holy, that also look contemporary, so it's like urban, inside of a space where you wouldn't think that you would have like stained glass. I wanted it to feel like the exhibition, like church, children art, and not put them in like these like little ass frames and say this is like children work. But what would it look like if like my daughter creates a piece and then it's like blown up, like huge in a museum with like beautiful framing and like, you know, the right lights on it. Like, how cool would that be? I don't know. That's just a thought.